David and Goliath is one of the most popular stories in human history, and we think we know it. What does it go like? It's like David is the young man full of faith, and he doesn't like that the giant Goliath is challenging his God. So he says, I'll fight him, I'll defeat him, when Goliath mocks God, and he goes and he does defeat him. And what do our pastors tell us? Just like David, you can slay the giants in your life if only you have enough faith. But the real story is meant to be understood on such a deep, sublime, existential level that if you stay with me, I promise you by the end of this, you will never look at life the same way again. Let me start by reading the narrative to you. It comes from the book of 1 Samuel chapter 17. It goes like this. Now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle and were gathered at Sokal, which belongs to Judah, and they encamped between Sokal and Asakah in Ephes-Dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of elec and drew up in battle array against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and the valley was between them. And the champion went out from the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. That's about 10 feet 3 inches tall. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels. That's about 20 pounds. And a shield bearer went before him. He stood and cried to the armies of Israel and said to them, Why have you come to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and thou the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourself, and let him come down to me. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, and who had 8 sons. And the man was old and advanced in years in the days of Saul. Then Jesse said to his son David, Take now for your brothers an ephah of this dried grain and these 10 loaves, and run to your brothers at the camp, and carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of their thousands, and see how your brothers fare. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of elec, fighting with the Philistines. So David rose early in the morning, left the sheep with a keeper, and took the things, and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to fight and shouting for battle. Then as he talked with them, there was the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up the armies of Philistines, and he spoke according to the same words, so David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, for they were dreadfully afraid. Then David spoke to the man who stood by him, saying, What shall be done for this man who kills the Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him in the manner, saying, So shall it be done for the man who kills him. Now when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul, and they sent for him. Then David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with the Philistine. And Saul said to David, You're not able to go against the Philistine to fight with him, for you're a youth, and he's a man from war from his youth. But David said to Saul, Your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck it and killed it. Moreover, David said, The Lord, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. Saul said, Go. He clothed David with his armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head, and he clothed him with a coat of mail. David fastened his sword to his armor, and David said to Saul, I cannot walk with these things, for I have not tested them. So David took them off. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy, good-looking. So the Philistine said to David, Am I a dog that you've come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Then David said to the Philistine, You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, God of the armies of Israel. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands. Then all the assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear for battle is the Lord's, and he will give it into your hands. Then David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it, and he struck the Philistine on the forehead. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword, chopped his head off. The Philistines got scared and ran. Israel made chase. So that is the basic story of David and Goliath. Doesn't it strike you as odd that all through the Old Testament there's these references to giants? They go by different tribal names: Rephaim, Anakim, sons of Anak, Emim, Zamzumim, Og of Bashan. They're all through it. And back in Genesis 3:15 and 16, you see something interesting. You see God say to Adam and Eve and to Nakash, the serpent, the deceiver, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed, followed by 2 genealogies in Genesis 4. Then the next thing you know, God calls out a people, Israel and Abraham, and in chapter 14, we learn one of the very first things that God has Abraham do is fight some of the Rephaim. And it goes on and on all through the book of Genesis. And we pick it up in Deuteronomy in chapter 128. We hear more about giants. We hear, where can we go? Our brethren have discouraged our hearts, saying, the people are greater and taller than we. The cities are great and fortified up to heaven. Moreover, we have seen the sons of the Anakim there. Sons of Anak, Anakim, beloved of Anu, Anunnaki. Deuteronomy 2:10 and 11. The Emim, another tribe of them, have dwelt there in times past, a people as great and as numerous and as tall as the Anakim. They were also regarded as giants like the Anakim, but the Moabites called them the Emim. Deuteronomy 2:20 says, that was also regarded as a land of giants. Giants formerly dwelt there, but the Ammonites called them the Zamzumim. In Deuteronomy 3:11, we hear about Og of Bashan. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnants of the giants. Indeed, his bedstead was an iron bedstead. Did you know that the Philistines specialized in the smelting of iron? Quite interesting, no? Anyway, is it not in Rabbah and the people of Ammon, the bedstead of Og? Like they're saying, hey, isn't it documented over in this museum that this dude's bed is there? 9 cubits is its length. Well, if Goliath was 6 cubits and that's 10 feet, that makes this bed 15 feet long and 8 feet wide. Deuteronomy 9:2, a people great and tall, the descendants of the Anakim, whom you know, and of whom you've heard it said, who can stand before the descendants of Anak. Then we get into the book of Numbers because something is interesting. Joshua, the understudy of Moses, is going to go into the land of Canaan. And with the power of God, he is being told, you will wipe out all these remnants of the Nephilim, their descendants, the Old Testament sons of God, B'nai Ha-Elohim, those who from heaven to earth came, and they mated with earth women, and they produced all sorts of giants and weird different types of beings. And we are told that they were the mighty men of old, the men of renown. We were told that they were on the earth before the flood and also after that, and we're seeing all kinds of references to them. Now let's see how Joshua fares getting them out of the promised land. Joshua 11:21. And at that time Joshua came and cut off the Anakim from the mountains, from all the mountains of Judah, including the Sokah and Azekah in Judah, that Israel and the Philistines face off on in this very moment in our story of David and Goliath. Now do you understand why David is so angry when he hears Goliath? These aren't 2 random mountains in the middle of Israel. These are the mountains that God had given Joshua and the Israelites the power supernaturally to remove from the land. Joshua removed them from this very mountain, on which David turns around and hears this giant down in the valley cursing the living God. And he looks around at the Israelites and says, where are your gods? Have you forgotten already? Just like those in bondage in Egypt had forgotten the living God. Just like in the wilderness we had forgotten the miracles of the living God. Just like during the time of Jesus when he healed 10 lepers and only one came back to throw himself at his feet and say, you truly are the Son of God, thank you. David is hissed because David knows his Israel history. He is of the house of Judah. He knows what happened. He knows how Joshua was given the strength to go and get rid of them, because remember that in Numbers it says, we went up through the south, we defeated the sons of Anak. Nevertheless, the people who dwelt there were strong. Cities were fortified and large. Moreover, we saw the sons of Anak there. This land devours its own inhabitants. The men are of great stature. There we saw giants, the descendants of Anak, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and what we have seemed to them as well. In Joshua 13, it reminds us of the strength of Og and how he ruled in iron, the very metal that the Philistines know how to smelt as they worship their false god Dagon. Joshua praises God because the Lord had spoken and told him to get rid of the Anakim. In fact, the only reason they're even still there is because one of Joshua's right-hand men, Achan, had disobeyed God. God said, this is the land of promise that I promised to your grandfathers going back to Abraham. Don't keep any of their stuff. Don't keep any of them. Destroy them. Destroy their things. Leave no memory of them. How many times are you on social media nowadays and you see people go, how can you believe and worship a God who committed genocide? This just shows you they've not read their Bible. Genesis 3, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed, followed by genealogies, followed by a narrative about how the sons of God came down, interfered with humanity, mated with earth women, and then we have this entire narrative. The entire Old Testament, in part, is the people of God believing enough, having faith enough that their God is going to help them rid the land of these beings. Joshua 14 tells us how Joshua defeated even Arba, the strongest of the Anakim, and how after God granted them peace from war. Joshua 15, now Judah, David is of the house of Judah, is he not? The son of Jesse. Judah occupied all the lands, and it was blessed by God. They occupied the land all the way to the valley of the Rephaim. And in verses 13 and 14 of chapter 15 in the book of Joshua, we learn how Caleb was rewarded for defeating the 3 sons of the most powerful of the Anunnaki. Joshua 17:15 tells us how Ephraim and Manasseh were given a portion of the land from more giants defeated under Israel. So all the way we get up through the period of the Judges, and we're taught time and again how God divided the land of these former remnants, Rephaim, Emim, Zamzumim, sons of Anak, and gave it to his people, Israel. So yes, David is pissed. David is not just saying, guys,
who's that giant down there saying nasty things about God?
Ha ha ha, that silly child, he's so idealistic. No, what happened was Israel forgot about the special connection of their God, the supernatural power. They said, give us a king. And they were given Saul. And one of the first things that happened was they fell into the same pattern that every human civilization had fallen into. Pride, arrogance, comfort, affluenza. And now here they are standing on the very mountain that their ancestors had defeated Goliath's beings. But David gets it. He hears Goliath down in the valley, bad-mouthing their God. And he looks and he remembers. He remembers how Joshua and Caleb defeated the sons of Anak with hail from heaven. And he looks around and he goes, where's the king? Who's going to deal with this? I'll go down there and deal with this. Don't you remember? Wake up! Wake up, Israel! David ends up defeating Goliath of Gath. And it invigorates Israel, and they remember. They see what David does, and they remember the power of their God. I pose to you that the story of David and Goliath is not unique because it's, a story about a giant. That's cool. It's the story of the destruction of the final giants. Listen to what it goes on to say in 2 Samuel chapter 21. When the Philistines were at war again with Israel, David and his servants with him went down and fought against the Philistines, and David grew faint. Then Ishba-benob, who was one of the sons of the giant, the weight of whose bronze spear was 300 shekels, who was bearing a new sword, thought he could kill David. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, came to his aid and struck the Philistine and killed him. Then the men of David swore to him, saying, you shall go out no more with us to battle. Now it happened afterward that there was again a battle with the Philistines at Gob. Then Sibbachai the Hushathite killed Saph, who was one of the sons of the giant. Again, there was war at Gob with the Philistines, where Elhanan, the son of Jahar-Ortagim, the Bethlehemite, killed the brother of Goliath, the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. Yet again, there was war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number, and he was also born to a giant. So when he defied Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shemiah, David's brother, killed him. These 4 were born to the giant of Gath and fell by the hand of David and the hand of his servants. There are no more giants now. But the story's not over. Let me tell you why the story's not over. Now the prophets speak. And you do see them make reference to the giants, the Nephilim, the Rephaim, the sons of Anak, and they say things like, wasn't it God and his power who destroyed these very beings? And here you are again, Israel, lacking faith. They speak. And then the prophets stop speaking for about 400 years. But then in the New Testament it says, in John chapter 1, but as many as received him, he gave them the right to become sons of God. Talking about Jesus Christ, chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And it goes on to say, what? But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to be sons of God? Do we have a redefinition of this? Genesis 3:15 and 16, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. Well, how does this affect that? I don't understand. What does it say in the book of Romans, chapter 3, starting with verse 23? For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus, whom God set forth as a propitiation by his blood through faith to demonstrate his righteousness. Because in his forbearance he passed over the sins previously committed, that he might be just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Christ Jesus. Let me read that again, please. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus, whom God set forth as a propitiation by his blood. Bloodlines, your seed and her seed, no longer matters for all who believe on the Son of God. Now all the scheming of the fallen ones to tamper with the lines of humanity don't matter, because there's a final permanent solution. The book of Hebrews calls Jesus the once and for all sacrifice. This is the remedy. Don't get it twisted. The first generation Nephilim were thrown into damnation forever. But the ones who were descendants of the sons of God from the Old Testament and the earth women, it's not their fault. They were just born into that bloodline. Now there's a way of redemption for them as well. It is one of the most amazing stories in the Bible and the most amazing story in human history. So you see the story of David and Goliath. It's the giants in our lives, and with faith we can slay them. You can read it that way if you want, or we can see the context of the full narrative. God's work to save us. Now those disembodied spirits from the Nephilim descendants, Rephaim, Zamzumim, sons of Anak, they try in each generation to dethrone the God of the universe, and they are back today with a vengeance. More than ever, we have to turn to Christ. We have to pray. In order to do all this, we have to know the truth, though. It's hard to say why previous generations read the Bible like busted up morality stories, but it's not. It is the story of the redemption of man, from the beginning in the garden, through the gospel of Jesus Christ, to the birth of his church, and what will happen in the future in Revelation. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to help me. Everybody can do $1 or $2. Consider it a tithe, but we're taking our ministry public and incorporating it and making it more professional online. We have PayPal, we have Cashapp, we have Venmo. You can click that thanks button right there. You can become a channel member. On Facebook, you can give with the star. There are dozens of ways you can give. You can send us a check made out to Evangelist Nick Garrett to P.O. Box 831, Chesapeake Beach, Maryland 20732. We need all the resources we can get. Just by structuring our organization, we're taking on monthly costs. And I'm stepping out there in faith because I believe the work we're doing matters, and I believe it's going to make a difference for a lot of people. So if you got anything out of the video today, if you were edified, you can like this video, please. You can share this video. You can comment on it, whether you agree with me or not, because all that stuff helps with the algorithm. Let me know what you think about this story. David and Goliath. Is it about the challenges in your life, or do you see now how it was part of a much bigger picture? We'll talk to you next time.